Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched three enemy ships move toward them through the darkness of space, their alien hulls gleaming under the distant starlight like metal sharks hunting for blood, and he knew this battle would be different from all the others he had fought in his 15 years of service to Earth's military forces. The enemy ships belonged to the Zephyrian Empire, a race of tall blue-skinned beings who had been at war with humanity for over a decade, and these particular vessels were destroyers, each one twice the size of Morrison's ship and armed with enough firepower to turn a small moon into floating debris. Yet Morrison felt no fear as he studied their approach patterns on the main display screen. Lieutenant Amy Carter turned from her tactical station and looked at Morrison with worried eyes that reflected the red glow of the warning lights that had been flashing for the past 10 minutes since the enemy ships had appeared on their long-range sensors, and she spoke in a voice that barely concealed her concern about their current situation and the odds they faced. "Commander, they are broadcasting on all frequencies and demanding that we surrender immediately," Amy said while checking her instruments, again to make sure she had not missed any important details about the enemy formation or their weapons status. And Morrison could hear the alien voices crackling through the ship's communication system like angry static filled with hatred and contempt. Zephyrian Commander's voice came through the speakers in broken English that sounded harsh and mechanical, as if the alien was having trouble forming human words with his strange vocal cords, and his message was clear and direct without any room for negotiation or compromise between the two forces. "Human Morrison, your species has ruled the stars long enough, and today your time of dominance comes to an end," the alien voice declared with obvious satisfaction at finally cornering the human commander, who had caused so much trouble for their empire. And Morrison could hear other Zephyrian voices in the background speaking in their own language, which sounded like musical chirping mixed with electronic noise. Morrison walked slowly to the center of the bridge, where he could see all his crew members at their stations, each one focused on their duties despite the desperate nature of their current situation. And he knew these men and women had followed him through dozens of battles and would follow him through this one as well. No matter what the outcome might be, the alien voice continued its demands over the communication system, growing more impatient with each passing moment as Morrison failed to respond to their ultimatum, and the Zephyrian commander seemed to take Morrison's silence as either fear or defiance, both of which only served to anger the alien further. "We know you can hear us, Morrison." The voice crackled with static interference from the enemy's transmission equipment, and Morrison could picture the blue-skinned alien captain standing on his own bridge surrounded by his crew members, all of them eager to finally destroy the human who had become such a problem for their military operations. Amy Carter checked her sensors again and reported that the enemy ships were continuing their approach and would be within firing range in less than 5 minutes, which meant Morrison had to make a decision soon or risk being caught in a crossfire that would destroy his ship and kill everyone aboard. Yet he remained calm and collected, as if this was just another routine patrol mission. The crew waited for Morrison's orders while the enemy ships grew larger on the viewing screen, their weapons charging with energy that created bright flashes along their hulls like lightning trapped in metal containers. And still Morrison stood quietly in the center of the bridge as if he was waiting for something that only he could see or understand. Finally, Morrison spoke in a voice that was steady and confident, without any trace of doubt or fear about what was going to happen in the next few minutes. And his words carried across the bridge like a promise that everything would work out exactly as it should. Despite the overwhelming odds they faced, "Tell them I said no," Morrison replied to the enemy's surrender demand, and Amy Carter immediately transmitted his response back to the Zephyrian ships while the rest of the crew prepared for battle, checking their weapon systems and defensive shields. One final time before the fighting began, the alien commander's response came quickly and filled with rage at Morrison's refusal to surrender, and his voice rose to almost a shriek as he realized the human was going to fight rather than accept defeat gracefully, which seemed to surprise and anger the Zephyrian more than he had expected. What happened next would become the stuff of legend among both human and alien forces throughout the galaxy. As Morrison began giving orders that seemed to make no sense at first but quickly revealed themselves to be part of a brilliant tactical plan that used the enemy's own strength and numbers against them in ways that defied conventional military thinking, Morrison ordered his ship to accelerate directly toward the center enemy destroyer while simultaneously rotating to present their smallest profile to the alien weapons, and he called for a full power burst from their engines at precisely the moment when the Zephyrian ships began firing their main guns, creating a spectacular light show in the darkness of space. The enemy had expected Morrison to try to run or hide behind some nearby asteroids, but instead he flew straight into their formation like a missile seeking its target, and this unexpected move confused the alien commanders who had prepared for a conventional space battle between opposing fleets rather than what appeared to be a suicide attack. As the ships closed distance rapidly, Morrison gave a series of rapid-fire orders that sent his crew scrambling to adjust power levels, redirect shield energy, and prepare weapons for firing at point-blank range. And everything had to be timed perfectly or they would all die. In the next 30 seconds, the first Zephyrian destroyer fired its main weapon just as Morrison's ship passed underneath it. But the human commander had calculated the exact angle and timing needed to avoid the blast while simultaneously returning fire at the alien vessel's weakest point, creating a chain reaction that tore through the enemy ship's hull like paper. The second destroyer tried to turn and follow Morrison's ship, but this move put it directly in the path of debris from the first explosion, and the alien captain realized too late that Morrison had used their own formation against them in a way that made it impossible for them to support each other without creating more problems. The third Zephyrian ship managed to get off several shots at Morrison's vessel, but the human commander seemed to know exactly where each blast would go and moved his ship accordingly, as if he could predict the future and see every possible outcome of the battle before it actually happened, leaving the alien crew wondering if they were fighting a man or something far more dangerous. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison's victory over the Zephyrian destroyers, and the story of that battle had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, reaching the ears of every alien species that maintained any kind of military force or intelligence network, and the name Morrison had become something that was whispered in dark corners of alien command centers with a mixture of fear and fascination. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Vanguard and read through the latest intelligence reports about Morrison's growing reputation among the various alien races, and she found it hard to believe that one human could have such an impact on the political landscape of the entire galaxy. Yet the evidence was right there in the classified documents spread across her desk. The Acrylian High Command had held 3 emergency sessions in the past month, all focused on what their military analysts were calling the Morrison problem, and their intelligence reports painted a picture of a human commander who seemed to possess abilities that went far beyond normal tactical training or battlefield experience, which worried the alien leaders more than any conventional military threat. Rodriguez had served with distinction for 12 years and had never seen anything like the psychological effect that Morrison was having on enemy forces throughout known space, and she wondered if the stories about his impossible victories were exaggerated until she received orders to rendezvous with Morrison's fleet at coordinates near the disputed Kepler system, where a major battle was expected to take place. The Krillians were a reptilian species known for their cold logic and mathematical approach to warfare, yet their latest strategic documents showed signs of genuine panic when discussing potential encounters with Morrison's forces, and their military planners were developing increasingly desperate tactics designed specifically to counter his apparent ability to predict their every move. General Vextar, the Krillians' most experienced military commander, had submitted a detailed analysis to his superiors that included security footage from various battles involving Morrison, and the alien general's conclusions were disturbing even to his own people, who prided themselves on their rational approach to military conflicts and strategic planning. The footage showed Morrison's ship reacting to enemy attacks before they were actually launched, changing course to avoid weapons fire that had not yet been fired, and positioning his forces to exploit weaknesses in alien formations that the enemy commanders had not yet decided to create, as if the human could see into the future and know exactly what his opponents would do. Rodriguez met with Morrison for the first time when their fleets joined together near a massive Krillian battle station that intelligence reports indicated was heavily defended and considered impossible to assault with conventional tactics. Yet Morrison seemed confident that they could destroy the facility with just 3 ships and minimal casualties. The battle station was a marvel of alien engineering, built into a large asteroid and protected by energy shields that could withstand the combined firepower of an entire fleet. But Morrison studied the tactical displays for only a few minutes before announcing that he had found a way to penetrate their defenses using a coordinated attack that would require split-second timing. Rodriguez watched in amazement as Morrison coordinated the 3-ship assault with precision that seemed almost supernatural, calling out orders that anticipated exactly when the station's defensive systems would cycle through their rotation patterns. And his timing was so accurate that it appeared he had detailed knowledge of the alien technology that should have been impossible for any human to possess. The attack succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, with Morrison's forces penetrating the station's shields at the exact moment when they were weakest and delivering devastating damage to critical systems before the Krillian defenders could respond effectively, and the entire operation was completed in less than 10 minutes with no human casualties. Meanwhile, on the Krillian homeworld of Nexus Prime, General Vexstar presented his latest findings to the High Command in a briefing room filled with the Empire's most senior military leaders, and his report contained information that challenged everything they thought they knew about human capabilities and the nature of warfare itself. The security footage from the battle station attack showed Morrison's ship changing course 3 seconds before the station's weapons fired, adjusting shield frequency 2 seconds before the Krillian beam weapons locked onto their target, and launching missiles at coordinates that would intercept enemy fighters that had not yet been deployed from their launch. Base Vexstar's analysis concluded that Morrison either possessed technology that was far beyond anything currently known to exist in the galaxy, or he had developed abilities that transcended normal biological limitations and allowed him to perceive events before they actually occurred. Both possibilities being equally disturbing to the Krillian leadership, the High Command ordered their scientists to develop new tactics specifically designed to counter Morrison's apparent precognitive abilities, including randomized attack patterns generated by quantum computers and communication systems that use quantum encryption to prevent any possible form of interception or prediction. Yet early test results suggested that even these measures would be ineffective. Dr. Helen Baker, a human xenopsychologist who had been assigned to study the psychological effects of human military tactics on alien populations, began documenting the growing fear that Morrison's reputation was creating among enemy forces, and her research revealed patterns that went far beyond normal battlefield psychology. Alien crews were reporting nightmares about facing Morrison in battle, with some Zephyrian pilots claiming that they could see Morrison's ship in their dreams even when they were stationed in completely different sectors of the galaxy, and several Krillian commanders had requested transfers to avoid any possibility of encountering the human commander. The psychological impact was so severe that some alien military units had begun refusing direct orders to engage any vessel that was known to be under Morrison's command. And their refusal was not based on cowardice, but on a genuine belief that fighting Morrison was essentially a form of suicide that would accomplish nothing except the destruction of their own forces. Baker's reports indicated that the fear was spreading through alien communication networks faster than any official military intelligence, with stories about Morrison's abilities growing more elaborate and supernatural with each retelling, and the human commander was beginning to take on almost mythical status among species that had never even encountered his forces. Directly, Rodriguez found herself studying Morrison's behavior during their joint operations, trying to understand how he managed to anticipate enemy movements with such accuracy, and she noticed that he often seemed to be listening to something that no one else could hear, as if he was receiving information from a source that was invisible to everyone around The most disturbing aspect of Morrison's tactical abilities was that they seemed to be improving over time, with each battle demonstrating new levels of precision and foresight that suggested his capabilities were continuing to evolve in ways that defied scientific explanation. And Rodriguez began to wonder if they were witnessing the emergence of something entirely new in human development after witnessing 3 more impossible victories in the span of 2 weeks. Rodriguez filed her own report to Earth Command, describing Morrison's tactics as being beyond anything that could be explained by conventional training or experience, and she recommended that a team of scientists be assembled to study the phenomenon. Before it attracted even more attention from hostile alien forces, the galaxy was beginning to take notice of humanity in ways that went far beyond normal diplomatic or military concerns. And Rodriguez realized that Morrison's reputation was creating a situation that could fundamentally change the balance of power among all the major species. Whether humanity was prepared for such attention or not, and she wondered if one man could really be responsible for reshaping the political landscape of the entire known universe. The impossible had finally happened in the history of galactic politics, as 3 separate alien species that had been bitter enemies for centuries decided to put aside their ancient hatred and form an unprecedented military alliance with one single goal that united them despite their vast cultural and biological differences. And that goal was the complete elimination of Commander Jake Morrison and his growing influence on the balance of power throughout known. Space Admiral Susan Wells received the intelligence report about the alien alliance through diplomatic channels that had been established for emergency communications between Earth and the major alien governments, and the message was delivered by ambassadors from all 3 species in a joint session that demonstrated just how serious they considered the threat that Morrison represented to galactic stability. The Zephyrian ambassador spoke first in the emergency session, his blue skin seeming to shimmer under the artificial lights of the diplomatic chamber as he explained that his empire could no longer tolerate the existence of a human who appeared to possess abilities that gave him an unfair advantage in military conflicts, and his words carried the weight of official government policy rather than personal opinion. Your commander, Morrison, represents an existential threat to the established order of galactic civilization. The Zephyrian ambassador stated in carefully measured tones that left no room for negotiation or compromise, and Admiral Wells could see that the alien was genuinely frightened by whatever intelligence reports his government had received about Morrison's recent activities. The Krillian representative nodded in agreement and added his own concerns about Morrison's apparent ability to predict enemy tactics with supernatural accuracy, explaining that their military analysts had concluded that conventional warfare was impossible when facing an opponent who seemed to know their plans before they made them, and this created an unacceptable strategic disadvantage for any force that opposed him. The 3rd member of the alliance was perhaps the most shocking, as the insectoid Hyvanth had never before cooperated with any mammalian species in their recorded history, yet their ambassador clicked and buzzed in their complex language while a translation device converted their words into standard galactic common, expressing concerns that Morrison's influence was disrupting the natural order of species. Development Admiral Wells listened to the joint declaration with growing amazement as she realized that 3 civilizations that had spent centuries trying to destroy each other were now working together because they considered one human to be a greater threat than their traditional enemies. And this unprecedented cooperation demonstrated just how much Morrison's reputation had grown since his first victory against the Zephyrian destroyers. The combined alien fleet that was being assembled for this operation was massive beyond anything that had ever been seen in galactic history, with over 200 ships representing the finest military technology that 3 advanced civilizations could produce. And intelligence reports suggested that they were pooling their resources to develop new weapons specifically designed to counter Morrison's tactical advantages. When Admiral Wells contacted Morrison to inform him about the alliance and offer him the option of returning to Earth until the situation could be resolved through diplomatic channels, his response surprised her with its casual confidence. as if he had been expecting this development and had already made plans to deal with it. Sometimes, the best way to reveal the truth is to make people look for it in all the wrong places. Morrison replied when Colonel Pete Harris asked how he had managed to unite 3 hostile species against him, and his cryptic answer suggested that he understood something about the situation that nobody else had figured out, yet Morrison refused the direct order to return to Earth and instead requested permission to engage the alien alliance with his current fleet, which consisted of only 12 ships compared to the enemy's 200, and his confidence in the face of such overwhelming odds made Admiral Wells wonder if the stories about his supernatural abilities might actually be true. The alien fleet began experiencing strange problems almost immediately after they assembled at the predetermined coordinates, with ships reporting unexplained technical failures that their engineers could not diagnose or repair, and navigation systems throughout the fleet started displaying impossible readings that suggested space itself was behaving differently. In Morrison's present, Sigrillian technicians reported that their quantum-encrypted communication systems were somehow being intercepted despite using security protocols that should have been mathematically impossible to break, and their computers were displaying error messages in languages that did not exist in any known database, as if the machines themselves were being influenced by some unknown force. The Zephyrian ships experienced similar problems with their weapon systems, randomly changing targets without any input from their crews, and their defensive shields were fluctuating in patterns that followed no recognizable mathematical sequence, creating vulnerabilities that appeared and disappeared faster than their tactical computers could analyze and compensate for them. Most disturbing of all were the reports from crew members throughout the Allied fleet who claimed to be experiencing shared dreams about Morrison that seemed more like visions than normal sleep-induced fantasies, and these dreams always showed the human commander standing in a place that looked like the bridge of his ship but was somehow different, as if it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Hyvanth, who communicated through a collective consciousness that linked all members of their species, reported that their mental network was being disrupted by signals that seemed to originate from Morrison's location, and their psychic navigators were unable to maintain proper coordinates because the space around the human fleet was somehow unstable. Admiral Wells ordered Dr. Carl Stevens, Earth's leading expert in theoretical physics, to analyze the sensor data that was being collected from the area where Morrison's fleet was operating, and the preliminary results suggested that reality itself was being altered in ways that current scientific understanding could not explain or predict. Readings showed quantum fluctuations that violated several fundamental laws of physics, with energy patterns that suggested the existence of additional dimensions that were somehow intersecting with normal spacetime, and these anomalies were growing stronger as the alien fleet approached Morrison's position. Colonel Harris reported that communication with Morrison's fleet was becoming increasingly difficult, as their transmissions were somehow being routed through what appeared to be parallel timelines, and messages were arriving before they were sent or containing information about events that had not yet occurred. Alien Alliance commanders held emergency conferences to discuss their options, but every tactical scenario they developed seemed to be countered by Morrison before they could implement it, as if he was somehow listening to their private communications. Despite using the most advanced security technology available in the galaxy, General Vexstar suggested that they should abandon the mission and retreat to a safe distance until they could develop new strategies. But the other commanders argued that Morrison's influence was growing stronger with each passing day and that waiting would only make the situation worse. The Zephyrian fleet commander proposed a desperate strategy that involved simultaneous attacks from multiple directions using randomized timing sequences, but even this plan seemed futile when their own computers began displaying tactical projections that showed Morrison's forces winning every possible scenario as the alien fleet prepared for what would likely be the most important battle in galactic history. Strange phenomena continued to manifest around Morrison's position, including gravitational anomalies that suggested the presence of objects that did not appear on any sensors and temporal distortions that made it impossible to determine exactly When events were actually occurring, the crew members throughout the Allied fleet reported increasing levels of anxiety and fear that seemed to be coming from an external source, rather than their own natural reactions to the situation. And some aliens began claiming that they could hear Morrison's voice in their minds even when their communication systems were completely shut. Down Admiral Wells realized that whatever was happening around Morrison went far beyond normal military tactics or advanced technology, and she began to suspect that humanity was about to discover something about the nature of consciousness and reality that would change everything they thought they knew about the universe and their place in it. Dr. Carl Stevens had been analyzing the sensor data from Morrison's battles for 3 weeks straight, working 18-hour days in his laboratory aboard the research vessel UES Discovery. And what he found in the quantum readings made him question everything he thought. He knew about the fundamental nature of reality and the limits of human consciousness in the universe. The energy signatures around Morrison's ship showed patterns that should not have been possible according to current understanding of physics, with quantum fluctuations that suggested the presence of technology far beyond anything that humans or any known alien species had ever developed. Yet there was no evidence of any unusual equipment or modifications to Morrison's vessel. Stevens discovered that the anomalies were not coming from Morrison's ship itself but seemed to be centered around Morrison personally, as if his presence was somehow affecting the quantum structure of space-time in ways that created tactical advantages that appeared supernatural to anyone who witnessed them in battle. When Stevens finally gathered enough courage to approach Morrison with his findings, requesting a private meeting in Morrison's quarters aboard the UES Defiance, he expected the commander to dismiss his theories as impossible or ridiculous. But instead, Morrison listened carefully and then revealed a truth that changed everything Stevens thought he knew about the situation. 3 years ago, during a classified mission in the Vega system, my team encountered something that officially never existed, Morrison began, speaking in quiet tones that suggested he had been waiting for someone to discover the truth and ask the right questions about his abilities and their mysterious origin. The mission had involved investigating reports of strange energy readings from an uninhabited planet that showed signs of ancient civilization, and Morrison's team had discovered a structure buried deep beneath the planet's surface that appeared to be far older than any known galactic civilization. The artifact we found was not technology in any sense that we understand the term, Morrison continued, describing an object that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously and responded to consciousness rather than physical manipulation, creating a connection between Morrison's mind and the quantum fabric of reality itself. Stevens listened in amazement as Morrison explained that the artifact had not enhanced his tactical abilities through any conventional means, but had instead created what could only be described as quantum entanglement between his consciousness and the probability streams that governed all possible outcomes of any given situation. I do not see the future, Morrison said carefully, choosing his words with precision to help Stevens understand concepts that challenged the basic assumptions of human science and philosophy. I see all possible futures simultaneously, and I can perceive which choices lead to which outcomes before I make those choices. The artifact had somehow expanded Morrison's consciousness beyond the normal limitations of human perception, allowing him to process information from parallel timelines and probability streams that existed in dimensions adjacent to normal spacetime, and this expansion was continuing to grow stronger with each passing day. Lieutenant Emma Parker, Morrison's communications officer, had been experiencing strange dreams and flashes of enhanced perception for several months, and Morrison revealed that the artifact's influence was slowly spreading to his crew members, creating a network of enhanced human consciousness that was detectable to alien psychic abilities but incomprehensible to their understanding. Stevens realized that the alien fear of Morrison was not based on his military skills or advanced technology, but on their instinctive recognition that humanity was developing capabilities that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy, and this development represented an evolutionary leap that threatened their position as dominant species. The Alien Alliance was always part of the plan, Morrison admitted when Stevens asked why he had not tried to hide his abilities or avoid creating such widespread fear among the galactic powers, and his answer revealed a level of strategic thinking that operated on timescales far beyond normal military planning. Morrison explained that the alien species needed to perceive humanity as a unified threat worthy of their combined attention, because only by forcing them to work together could humanity demonstrate that cooperation was more beneficial than continued conflict. And the coming battle was designed to prove this point in a way that would reshape galactic politics permanently. The artifact had shown Morrison glimpses of possible futures where the various galactic species remained divided and eventually destroyed each other through endless warfare. And it had also revealed pathways toward cooperation and mutual development that could benefit all species if they could overcome their fear and mistrust of each other. Stevens began to understand that Morrison's apparent military victories were actually demonstrations of human potential rather than attempts to dominate or destroy alien civilizations, and each battle had been carefully designed to show the aliens that humanity possessed abilities they needed to understand rather than fear. When they realize what we are really capable of, they will understand that cooperation is the only logical choice, Morrison said, describing a future where the quantum consciousness network could be extended to willing members of any species that was ready to evolve beyond their current limitations. The artifact was not unique, Morrison revealed, but was one of many similar objects left behind by an ancient civilization that had achieved consciousness transcendence before moving beyond the need for physical existence. And these artifacts served as both tests and gifts for species that were ready to take the next step in their development. Lieutenant Parker joined the conversation and described her own experiences with the expanding consciousness network, explaining that she could sometimes sense the thoughts and emotions of her fellow crew members even when they were in different parts of the ship, and this connection was growing stronger each day. Stevens realized that the strange phenomena affecting the alien fleet were side effects of the consciousness network's expansion, as Morrison's enhanced awareness was beginning to influence space-time itself in ways that created the tactical advantages he used in battle. And these effects would continue to grow until the network reached some kind of critical mass. The quantum entanglement between Morrison's consciousness and the probability streams was not limited to his own decisions and actions, but extended to anyone who came into contact with his presence, which explained why alien crews were experiencing shared dreams and psychological disturbances when they encountered his forces. Morrison explained that the consciousness network was designed to be inclusive rather than exclusive, and that alien species could join the network voluntarily once they understood its true purpose and overcame their fear of losing their individual identity to some kind of human-dominated collective. The network does not erase individuality, Morrison assured Stevens when the scientist expressed concerns about the implications of shared consciousness. It enhances individual potential by connecting each person to the collective knowledge and experience of the entire network. The coming battle with the Alien Alliance would serve as the final demonstration of the network's capabilities. But Morrison's goal was not to destroy the enemy fleet, but to offer them the opportunity to experience the network directly and understand what humanity was truly offering to the galaxy. Stevens left the meeting with a completely new understanding of the situation and immediately began working on ways to document and study the consciousness network, realizing that humanity was on the verge of the most significant evolutionary development in the history of intelligent life in the universe. As he worked through the night analyzing the quantum data with fresh eyes, Stevens began to see patterns that revealed the true scope of what Morrison had discovered, and he understood that the fear of one human was actually fear of what all conscious beings could become if they were willing to transcend their current limitations and work together toward a shared future. The massive alien fleet arrived at the predetermined coordinates, expecting to find Morrison's small task force waiting for them in normal space. But instead they discovered a phenomenon that challenged every scientific principle they understood about the nature of reality, as space itself seemed to be bending and twisting around the human ships in ways that created Impossible Tactical Advantages Captain Tony Rodriguez, commanding the UES Sentinel as part of Morrison's fleet, reported to his crew that their navigation systems were displaying readings that made no sense according to conventional physics, with temporal distortions that suggested they were somehow fighting the battle from multiple timeline perspectives simultaneously. The alien commanders quickly realized that they were not facing a conventional military engagement, but something far more complex and disturbing, as every tactical maneuver they attempted was countered before they could fully implement it. And their quantum encrypted communications were somehow being anticipated despite using security protocols that should have been mathematically impossible to break. General Vextar, commanding the Krillian contingent of the Allied fleet, watched in growing horror as his carefully planned attack formations were disrupted by phenomena that his scientists could not explain, with gravitational fields that appeared and disappeared without warning and energy patterns that seemed to violate the basic laws of conservation. The Zephyrian ships reported that their weapon systems were targeting coordinates that showed no enemy presence on their sensors, yet their tactical computers insisted that Morrison's fleet was simultaneously occupying multiple positions in spacetime, and their gunners were unable to determine which targets were real and which were some kind of impossible illusion. The Hyvanth collective consciousness was experiencing unprecedented disruption as their psychic network encountered something that felt like a vast intelligence that encompassed multiple individual minds while remaining somehow unified. And their mental navigators were unable to maintain proper formation because the space around Morrison's position was fluctuating between different dimensional states. Morrison's voice suddenly filled the communication channels of every ship in the alien fleet, not through their radio systems but directly in the minds of every crew member, speaking in each alien's native language despite the fact that humans had never mastered the complex linguistic structures used by the Hyvanth, or the mathematical precision required for proper Krillian communication. You came here expecting to fight a battle. Morrison's voice resonated through the consciousness of every alien present, carrying with it images and sensations that conveyed meaning far beyond the simple words being spoken. But what you have found is an opportunity to understand what we could all become together. The alien fleet found itself unable to maintain aggressive formations as their ships began responding to navigation commands that their crews had not given, moving in patterns that created a complex three-dimensional mandala around Morrison's position. And the beauty of the formation was so overwhelming that many alien crew members stopped trying to fight and simply watched in amazement. Vextar made a desperate decision to ram his flagship directly into Morrison's vessel, believing that physical contact might disrupt whatever force was affecting his fleet. But as his ship approached the human commander's position, he began experiencing visions that showed him the interconnected web of consciousness that linked all intelligent beings throughout the galaxy. In the final moments before impact, Morrison opened a direct communication channel into Vextar's mind, not through technology but through the quantum network that the artifact had created, and the Krillian general found himself seeing the universe from Morrison's enhanced perspective. For the first time, Vextar saw the probability streams that governed all possible outcomes of any given situation, witnessed the branching paths of cause and effect that connected every decision to its consequences across multiple timelines, and understood that Morrison had not been fighting them but guiding them toward a greater understanding of their shared destiny. The collision that should have destroyed both ships instead created a moment of perfect synchronization between the human and Krillian consciousness networks, and Vextar experienced what it felt like to perceive reality from the perspective of enhanced human awareness, while Morrison simultaneously gained insight into the mathematical precision of Krillian thought processes. The other alien commanders watched in amazement as Vextar's ship passed through Morrison's vessel without causing any physical damage, as if both ships had temporarily existed in different dimensional phases that allowed them to occupy the same space without interacting. And the visual effect was like watching two ghosts embrace in the darkness of space. The Zephyrian fleet commander attempted to continue the attack despite the impossible phenomena surrounding Morrison's position, but his weapon's fire was somehow redirected through space-time and emerged from coordinates that created a spectacular light show rather than destructive explosions. And his crew reported that their targeting computers were displaying poetry in ancient Zephyrian dialects. The Hyvanth ships found that their collective consciousness was expanding beyond their normal species boundaries and beginning to include human thoughts and emotions, creating a hybrid awareness that was both terrifying and exhilarating as they experienced individual identity for the first time while maintaining their connection to the collective. Morrison's fleet moved through the alien formation like dancers performing a choreographed routine that had been practiced for years. Each human ship perfectly coordinated with the others despite the fact that they were operating across multiple timeline probabilities simultaneously, and their movements created energy patterns that resonated with the quantum structure of space itself. The battle became a demonstration rather than a conflict, with Morrison's forces showing the alien fleet how consciousness could transcend the normal limitations of physical existence and operate on levels that integrated multiple dimensional perspectives into a unified awareness that was greater than the sum of its individual components. Captain Rodriguez reported that his crew was experiencing shared consciousness with Morrison's other ships, and they could feel the presence of the alien crews as well, creating a network of awareness that included all the participants in what was no longer really a battle but had become something closer to a teaching demonstration. The alien fleet stopped trying to fight and instead began trying to understand what was happening to them. As their crews experienced levels of awareness and perception that their species had never achieved before, and many of them began to realize that Morrison represented not a threat to be destroyed, but a potential future that they could choose. To embrace the space around the two fleets became filled with patterns of light and energy that conveyed information directly to the consciousness of everyone present, bypassing language barriers and cultural differences to communicate concepts about the nature of reality and the possibilities for conscious evolution that the ancient artifact had revealed to Morrison Vextar. Still connected to the quantum network through his contact with Morrison, began broadcasting his experience to the other Krillian ships, sharing the mathematical beauty of enhanced consciousness and the logical necessity of cooperation between species that were all part of the same universal pattern of intelligent development. The Zephyrian commander found himself crying tears of joy as he experienced emotions and sensations that his species had never been capable of feeling before. And he understood that Morrison was offering them something far more valuable than victory or defeat in a conventional military sense. The Hyvanth Collective began incorporating human concepts of individual identity into their shared consciousness, creating a new form of awareness that maintained the benefits of collective thinking while allowing for personal growth and creative expression that their species had never experienced. As the demonstration continued, the alien crews began to understand that they were witnessing the next step in conscious evolution, and that Morrison's apparent supernatural abilities were actually a preview of what all intelligent species could achieve if they were willing to transcend their current limitations and work together toward a shared future. The battle ended not with the destruction of ships or the defeat of armies, but with a moment of revelation that changed the fundamental understanding of consciousness and reality for every being present. As the alien fleet finally comprehended what Morrison had been trying to show them through his impossible victories and supernatural tactical abilities, Morrison addressed the combined alien forces directly. His words carried not just through conventional communication systems, but through the quantum consciousness network itself, reaching into the minds and hearts of every crew member regardless of their species or their previous understanding of human capabilities. You feared one human because you thought I represented humanity's military superiority. Morrison's voice resonated through the expanded awareness that now connected all the participants in what had begun as a battle, but had become something closer to a spiritual awakening. But I do not represent what humans are, I represent what all of us could become. Dr. Stevens, working frantically aboard the UES Discovery to document and understand the phenomena that were occurring around Morrison's position, began transmitting his analysis to the assembled fleet commanders, explaining the true nature of the artifact and its purpose in the development of conscious beings throughout the galaxy. The artifact was not a weapon or a tool in any conventional sense, Stevens explained to the alien leaders who were still struggling to comprehend what they had experienced during the battle, but was instead a test and a gift left behind by an ancient civilization that had achieved consciousness transcendence millions of years before any current galactic species had evolved. The beings who created the artifacts had moved beyond the need for physical existence and had ascended to higher dimensional space. But they had left these consciousness-enhancing devices as a way for younger species to discover their own potential for evolution and development beyond their current biological and mental limitations. Admiral Kate Thompson, who had been appointed as Earth's representative to handle the complex diplomatic situation that was emerging from Morrison's revelations, began negotiating the framework for a new kind of alliance that would be based on shared consciousness. Rather than traditional political or military agreements, the quantum consciousness network was not limited to humans, Thompson explained to the alien ambassadors who had gathered to discuss the implications of Morrison's demonstration, and with proper preparation and understanding it could be extended to willing members of any species that was ready to evolve. Beyond their current limitations, the Krillian High Command, through General Vextar, who had experienced the network directly during his encounter with Morrison, announced their willingness to participate in consciousness-sharing experiments that would allow their most advanced scientists and philosophers to explore the possibilities that enhanced awareness could offer their civilization. The Zephyrian Empire, still struggling to understand the emotional revelations that their crews had experienced during the battle, requested time to study the psychological and social implications of joining a multi-species consciousness network while maintaining their cultural identity and independence. The Hyvanth Collective, which had always operated through shared consciousness within their own species, expressed fascination with the possibility of extending their mental network to include beings from other evolutionary backgrounds, seeing this as a natural progression of their existing social structure. Morrison announced his retirement from active military service, explaining that his role as a warrior had been completed and that he was now ready to take on the responsibility of teaching and guiding other species through the process of consciousness expansion that the artifact had initiated in humanity. The new position that Morrison accepted was unprecedented in galactic history, as he became humanity's first ambassador of consciousness, working with representatives from all species to establish protocols and procedures for safely integrating different forms of awareness into the expanding quantum network. 6 months after the battle that had begun as an attempt to destroy one human and had ended with the discovery of a new form of existence, reports began emerging from across the galaxy of individuals from various species demonstrating enhanced intuitive abilities and expanded awareness that suggested the consciousness network was continuing to grow. Zephyrian pilots reported being able to predict equipment failures before they occurred. Krillian scientists described experiencing flashes of insight that led to breakthrough discoveries in physics and mathematics, and Hyvanth individuals began expressing personal creativity and artistic vision while maintaining their connection to the collective consciousness. The galaxy was changing in ways that no one had anticipated, and the transformation was accelerating as more beings chose to participate in the consciousness network and discovered abilities they had never imagined possible within their own species. Morrison established a training center on a neutral planet where representatives from different species could come to learn about consciousness expansion and practice the mental disciplines required to safely join the quantum network without losing their individual identity or cultural heritage. The fear that had once surrounded Morrison's name was replaced by curiosity and hope as beings throughout the galaxy began to understand that he had never been their enemy but had instead been preparing them for an evolutionary leap that would benefit all conscious life. Dr. Stevens continued his research into the quantum properties of the consciousness network, discovering that the artifact was just one of many similar devices scattered throughout the galaxy, and that finding and activating these other artifacts could further accelerate the development of enhanced awareness among galactic civilizations. The ancient civilization that had created the artifacts had apparently foreseen the development of the current galactic species and had prepared a pathway for their conscious evolution that would allow them to avoid the destructive conflicts that had marked their own early development. Admiral Thompson worked with the newly formed Galactic Consciousness Council to establish guidelines for the ethical use of enhanced awareness abilities, ensuring that the network would be used for the benefit of all beings rather than as a tool for domination or control the species that had once united to destroy. Morrison now worked together to understand and develop the consciousness network, and their cooperation created a foundation for peace and mutual development that had never existed before in the recorded history of galactic civilization. Morrison's final official log entry as a military commander read, "They feared one human. For good reason. Not because I was dangerous to them, but because I represented the potential for all of us to become something greater than what we imagined possible. The war is over and the real journey is just beginning." 10 years later, the quantum consciousness network spanned dozens of species across the galaxy, and Morrison, now elderly but still mentally sharp, worked with beings from countless worlds to explore the deeper mysteries of existence that the ancient artifact had revealed. The galaxy remembered the legend of the human they had feared, but now they understood the truth about what had really happened during those early battles, and they realized that sometimes the most terrifying thing is not an enemy who wants to destroy you, but the discovery that you have been limiting yourself, and that possibilities exist far beyond anything you previously thought possible. Children from dozens of different species grew up learning about consciousness expansion as a natural part of their education, and the enhanced awareness that had once seemed supernatural became as normal and accepted as any other aspect of technological or social development. The ancient artifacts continued to be discovered on uninhabited worlds throughout the galaxy, and each new activation brought more species into the consciousness network, creating a web of enhanced awareness that connected intelligent beings across vast distances of space and time. Morrison's legacy was not the military victories that had made him famous, but the transformation of galactic civilization from a collection of competing species into a unified network of conscious beings, working together to explore the infinite possibilities of existence and to prepare for whatever challenges and opportunities awaited them in the vast universe beyond their current understanding.